can anyone get 10,000 followers in 3 months?
Technically, yes. So from a perspective of the algorithm showing your content to enough people, top of the funnel, and then enough people deciding, let's follow this person, absolutely. Is it realistic? Absolutely not. Even if you have experience in marketing, and I would even say that having experience in marketing puts you at a disadvantage, and I'll explain why in a bit. It's so much guesswork in organic marketing that it's pretty impossible to get the right strategy right from the get-go. And thus you need a time period for calibration. You need a time period for testing, and then you need the time period to put everything together into a brand new strategy. So for me, when it comes down to working with clients, I always am upfront with setting expectations and saying that the first 90 days, don't even look at the analytics. They don't matter. We are in this for the long term, and these first 90 days are all about experimentation. And experiments are meant to fail. And thus, these first 100 days, unless you're super lucky or you have done tons of groundwork and you know from the get-go and from experience, practical experience on the platform and recent experience on the platform that this works, I would say that it's not realistic to say in 90 days you could get 10K for everyone.
What about after that? So let's say they experience it 100 days, and then the next 3 months, can they do it then?
Again, technically, everyone can do it. Is it realistic though? I wouldn't say so. And again, it does come down to the fact that most people don't know which metrics to look at, and they don't know how to analyze data properly. And that was my experience when I first came in the organic marketing scene after I have been doing performance marketing for years. I looked at the scene, I looked at my competitors, and everyone was essentially throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something stuck. And the reality is, in the past 5 years, that hasn't really changed that much. There aren't really that many clear indicators which dictate what content does well. And even though Meta has been incredibly transparent and they have published, there's an 85-page documentation on why Reels go viral by Meta. And there is separate 50-page documentation on all of the recommendation systems, again, by Meta. So they're doing a lot more than other social media platforms are, but still, it can feel like a guessing game. So in that guessing game, I don't like putting time boundaries. Because if you say, I'm doing this for 6 months, and then if I don't hit 10K, I'm quitting, you're most likely doing yourself a disfavor. For me, it really does come down to survival and focusing on what will get you the followers and obsessing over that. And that's traffic and conversions, and traffic pretty much comes down to content, rather than focusing on something which you have absolutely no control over, which is how much reach are you going to get? How many non-followers are you going to be reaching? How many followers are you going to be gaining? And I feel like that process first approach is the smartest thing to do, not only when it comes down to growth on Instagram, but in general, with everything in business and life.
That's true. So when you do the experimenting phase, or I'm sure you're always experimenting, what are the kind of things that you're looking for? Because I think a lot of people actually don't even know how to experiment properly.
Yeah. I think so as well. So the first thing, which is really important when it comes down to experimentation, is limiting the amount of factors that you're changing. In marketing, that's called A/B testing. So for me, I know that there are 3 formats that I'm going to be obsessing, and that's it. Reels, carousels, single images. And then within these 3 formats, I know that there are a few formats, subcategories essentially of each format that I want to play around with. So for example, I want to play around with storytelling carousels, or I want to play around with listicles, or I want to play around with B-roll reels, or I want to play around with talking head reels. So for each format, I come up with specific subcategories that I want to A/B test. And once you do this, even 2 or 3 times, so once you start breaking everything 2 or 3 times, you will see that there are going to be a huge amount of variables involved. And that's why you need a long-ass period to actually test everything. So for me, the most important thing is your content strategy, which is your foundation. And then that content strategy needs to be based either on who you are as a person or who your competitors are, or optimally on both of these things. And then once you lay down, the content strategy is the most important thing that you need to be obsessing over and A/B testing. And then within your content strategy, the different formats, the different pures, not only what works on social, but what works for you. Because
Mm-hmm.
some people are phenomenal storytellers and they thrive when it comes down to static content like threads, content, carousels. But when they show up on video, it's just not their format. There is a barrier to entry, there is friction. And in that specific case, that's a really good data point. So for me, when I'm testing, I first want to make sure that this is a good fit for who I am as a person, who my client is. And then I want to make sure that there is a good market fit as well. So first and foremost, make sure that you build out your content strategy, then make sure that you find the three formats that you want to experiment with. And I usually do equal distribution between formats. So 33% trios, 33% carousels, 33% single images. And then I test these three formats with their subcategories for around 90 to 120 days.
Can you give
Find
some
what works. Yeah.
can you give some examples of those subcategories? Like what are a few things that you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at?
Yeah. So when it comes down to, let's say, Reels, we have a few formats. And before we started recording, we were also discussing how we can repurpose a podcast into a short form vertical video piece. So that's one specific subcategory, repurposed content from podcasts, from interviews, from YouTube videos. That's a subcategory. The second subcategory may be animation type reels, such as the ones that Bankov popularized last year. Those really simple animations with usually a black background and then white animations showing on top and then some voiceover. That's another subcategory. And then a talking head, really polished with retention-based editing. That's another subcategory. Then you may say, okay, I want to test something else. I want to test something which is extremely authentic. So I'm going to record myself in my car or when I'm going to walk the dog. So that's yet another subcategory. For me, it really does come down to looking at the whole landscape, not only in your market, because if you only look at your market, you're essentially falling within an echo chamber and everyone is doing the same thing, and that's boring as fuck. So you have to expand beyond that. You have to start looking at, and in the book, Still Like an Artist, the author really nails it. You shouldn't be stealing from your competitors. You should be stealing from the people that inspire your competitors. So when you start looking a step deeper, that's where the magic happens. Otherwise, you're always going to be a step behind everyone else.
That's so
So
true.
again, for me, it really does come down to finding these subcategories by looking at the broader market, the broader landscape of Instagram, not only your marketplace, and then saying, okay, I will test these five because they make sense for me, they make sense for my audience, they make sense for who I want to establish myself as an expert as, and then testing them out.
Yeah. Okay, so when you said before about the people that have experience in marketing, that's actually kind of a negative, and that really resonated with me because I've been a marketer for 20 years when I got on Instagram. So I went in thinking like I know this shit, like I know what worked for my clients, and when I actually got on it, it was like so humbling because nothing that I thought that works actually worked.
Yeah.
So can you kind of talk a little bit more
Absolutely.
about that?
Absolutely. I was in the exact same boat. I didn't have 20 years of experience, but I had been doing this for 5 years before starting my organic social media brand. And I had proven myself in this market, not on the global level, but on multiple local levels without any issues. And then I said, okay, no worries. I'll combine all of the learnings that I have had with my clients, and then I'll just do it for myself. And then I've met two major roadblocks. The first one is that there is a major difference between doing it for someone else and doing it for yourself. When emotion starts coming into the play, you're really, really put in a tough situation. And by your response, I can see that, again, that's something that resonated. So that's the first roadblock, that it's really difficult to take a step back and to evaluate yourself honestly. And for me, the foundation of any personal brand is the person behind it. And thus, in order to really shine on social, you need to first establish who you are as a person. And that self-analysis is such a pain in the ass. So that's one of the roadblocks. And then the second roadblock was the fact that you know so much. So when you're a beginner, you only know what's within your area of control. So let's say in the case of Instagram, that may be you only know that reels are necessary to grow. And thus you focus everything only on Reels. You don't obsess over your covers, you don't obsess over hashtags, you don't obsess over search engine optimization on Instagram, none of that bullshit. You focus your whole attention on this small piece of the puzzle. And then the more you learn that you don't know nothing essentially, and the more you understand that there is a much broader picture. But when you're an expert, you have that broader picture from the get-go. And that really puts you in a situation which can quite literally be paralyzing. And you made a carousel today before our interview, which really resonated with me because you said in that carousel that you had spent a lot of time planning, and then in the first 3 months, everything changed. And it was the same thing for me. I spent 5 months planning out my brand, everything from the way that my handle is going to be, to my headline, to my slogans, to my colors, to essentially my whole content strategy. I hadn't even made a single post, but I knew what I was going to be posting for the next 120 days, which is insane. Insane. And then when I started, these 5 months of efforts all went down the drain. Everything. Within the first 3 posts, I had learned more than the 5 months of work that I had spent. So for me, there is no substitution for raw data. And at that moment, I verified that extremely well. So for me, it really does come down to a balancing game between over obsessing and over planning and making an excuse saying that, oh, I'm being extremely productive, I'm planning everything. Bullshit, you're procrastinating. That's the reality. So you have to take a step back and say, okay, this is what I need. This is my minimum viable product. This is my content strategy for the next 2 weeks. This is what I want to be tracking. And in most cases, again, for most people, that should only be your content strategy. You will find your voice with time. So focus on that, test it out, see the response, get feedback, reiterate, keep improving.
Yeah. I love what you said also before about like it's like everyone's different, that like the thing that works for one person is not going to work for the other. And that's why even if you've experimented it, I can't just copy what you're doing because it's not going to work for me, right?
Yeah. That's something which I have mixed feelings about. I do think that simply copying will get most people somewhere, and that's why it happens so much. We saw it on Threads. We keep seeing it on Threads actually. There's so many accounts which just grow by copy and pasting other people's shit, and including a lot of your posts.
Yeah.
So copy and pasting will get you somewhere, let's say that, but it won't get you to the place which you want to be in. And throughout
What's the
my
difference?
I'll explain. Throughout my 10 years of experience, I've worked with a lot of people. I work with accounts that have struggled to grow but have a really clear message, and I've worked with accounts that have grown exponentially but have no idea how they got there. And I can tell you with conviction, the people who have an audience but have no idea what to do with that audience are so much more miserable than the people that don't have an audience but are in their happy place and they know what their voice is, they know what their value is, they know what their message is. I've worked with people who have grown from 0 to 150,000 followers overnight, pretty much, and they have grown in the wrong niche and they find out they're miserable with this. So at that moment, you not only have seen the fact that you have succeeded, so you have drawn out a ticket from the water, you have won, and then you find out that this is actually the biggest curse there is, because now you're stuck in a situation that you don't want to be in.
That's
so
what
yeah.
When you said that, like that just hit me because like I remember when we first started, like when the carousel community days. I remember everybody was like doing very similar carousels, and there were some that like 100-something thousand followers, and at that time I only had like 10,000 followers. And I'm not gonna name the person, but somebody reached out to me who had like 100,000 followers, and at that time I had not even 10,000. And he was actually saying, "Son, like I'm miserable because like I grew this account doing all these carousels, but I actually like resonate so much more with your content." And I hate that all my followers, all they want from me is like hashtags and things like that.
Now
So
you have that pressure on your shoulders, and that's
yeah.
much more difficult. And I've seen people walk away from hundreds of thousands of followers, something that most people would kill for, and something that most people pay thousands of dollars for. So it's not always, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And this also helped me tons when it comes down to people that copy my content, realizing that these people are miserable in one way or another. They will either reach a point in which they realize they haven't built anything authentic for themselves, or they will actually just give up, because you can only copy so far. And most people in the educational space, they don't survive more than 18 months. So I know that unless you really have solid foundations, and unless you do a lot of groundwork, and let's be honest, in order to build a really successful personal brand, you need to be a really successful person. For me,
Yeah.
that's something which I inherently believe, that if you're a good person, you can build a good brand. So one way or another, these profiles won't last.
You can only fake it for so long.
Exactly.
Something like
Exactly.
that.
Exactly.
So do you think there has to be some sort of a balance? Because there's, on the flip side, I also see people who are like, no, I have to do it this. They're so stubborn on their authenticity, and their
Yeah.
account is just not growing for like a year,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're just so stubborn
I
about it.
Yeah, I think that there definitely needs to be a balancing game, and if you're creative enough, you should be able to find solutions for pretty much anything. Saying, "Oh, I cannot grow on Instagram because they're forcing me to use Reels," is a lazy excuse, in my opinion. If you truly are a creative person, you will find a way to get your message across any format. And honestly, I think that seeing how Reels have transformed throughout the years is such a great example for what I'm saying. Because in the beginning, everyone just copy and pasted TikTok. If you remember the beginning days of Instagram Reels, it was just people dancing around. That was everything. And now it's so much more. It's so many different formats. I've seen, because on my newsletter, I do viral breakdowns of posts. And by the way, I featured your post last week. People loved it. But I do viral breakdowns of content pieces, vast majority of them reels, every single week. And I see that there are reels that are 5 seconds long and they've gone viral. There are reels that are 1 minute and 5 seconds long and they have gone viral. And all of them are wildly different in terms of format. So you cannot say that, oh, I'm authentic and that's the reason that I'm not growing.
Yeah. And I also don't think it's the algorithm, because that video you're talking about, I just reposted that last week
I
again for
saw,
the
and it
third
went
time.
viral again.
Yeah, and it got 1 million views again.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so I think I
uh,
really think it
yeah,
comes down to the content.
yeah. Let's just say that that's because I featured it in the newsletter. And that was perfect.
Okay, credit goes to
No,
credit
yeah.
goes to
Jokes
you.
aside, yeah. Jokes aside, I think that even if the algorithm has a play, because it absolutely has a role in which content pieces go viral. Your performance on Instagram prior to you making the post will influence how that post performs, for sure, absolutely. Um, I still think that that's not the right mentality to have, because that's putting everything outside of your area of control.
That's true.
Everything. It's
That's
like
true.
saying, oh, I'm fat because the air that I'm breathing is dirty. Yes, that may be true, but it's not going to help your
Yeah.
situation. And again, it really does come down to, I feel like, something which I learned really early in my journey, which was being productive and being busy are two separate things. And oftentimes, a lot of people make excuses by filling out their calendar with bullshit and then saying, oh, I'm so busy, I cannot take anything else. It really does come down to prioritization. And I think it's the same principle here. It really does come down to focusing on the things that are within your area of control. And if you really think that the algorithm is the only reason your content sucks, repurpose your content somewhere else. Try out TikTok, try out YouTube, try out any other platform. Because if your content doesn't perform on one platform, fair game, it may be the algorithm. But if it doesn't perform on all platforms, is it really the algorithm? Is it really all of these algorithms are conspiring against you and they're saying, fuck that guy? I
We
don't
talked
think so.
about that on Threads, right? I
Yeah.
agree with you that the content that I post, usually the ones that do well on YouTube also does well on TikTok, also does well. Like that video that I posted pretty much performs well on every platform.
Every platform, yeah.
But there are, I think, differences in platforms also, right?
There
Like, for
are,
example, yeah.
absolutely. There are, but they're much more granular than people
Yeah.
think. So, for example, captions on video content only matter on Instagram. No other
Mm,
platform cares about captions. Facebook doesn't care about it. TikTok doesn't care about it. YouTube doesn't care about it. So there are these minuscule differences, but as a general rule of thumb, a good content piece is going to be a good content piece.
yeah, I agree with you. And I think that, like you said something about you have to translate it for the platform. Like you can be saying the
Exactly.
same thing, but you might have to alter a little bit depending on the platform.
Exactly. I do genuinely believe that all social media platforms are like languages. And some platforms are like Chinese and English, completely different. Other platforms are like dialects within the
Hmm.
same language. So let's say when it comes down to English, we have British English, we have American English. In general, they're quite similar. There are some subtle differences. So if you're going to be repurposing your content from YouTube to, let's say, uh, Threads or X, you're going to have to do a lot more translation than if you're going to be repurposing your YouTube content to Instagram. But again, if you are savvy and if you understand the language of that specific platform, and the only way to understand that language is by actually spending some quality time, not doom scrolling, but some quality time researching that platform, I think that there's nothing stopping you from taking one great piece of content and blasting it everywhere and succeeding.
Yeah, I do think that you have to spend some time on the platform to really learn the platform. Like that language thing, by the way, is such a great analogy. like
I'm really glad that
if
you
you
like
want
it.
to learn
Yeah,
the language, you have to go spend some time there. Like that's the best way to learn the language. And I do think
exactly.
that,
You have to immerse yourself in the
yeah,
in the platform.
exactly. Yeah. Okay. Um, I also think you're the perfect. You lead by example when you said like when the reels came out, like everybody's like blaming the algorithm. But I've seen your content evolve throughout the years, and you really do a great job of that. Like just changing strategy when needed and um, going with the wave. So throughout your years, because remember in the beginning you grew. I remember you grew like 50,000 followers in like 3 months. Or, like it was some crazy ass growth, right? And you said that you learned you learned a lot in those years, like not like just being busy is not what's productive, all of those things. So can you, over the last 4 years, can you give some like some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in content creation, something just to
Yeah, yeah,
preface it?
no worries. I just built out a product on content creation, so I have all of these lessons memorized because I went through my
Okay.
journey. I think that the first thing that you have to understand is your bottlenecks. You truly have to reflect and be mindful about what you enjoy from the content creation process. And I generally break down the content creation process into several stages. There are small differences depending on format, video versus carousels, but a content piece generally comes down to having a good idea, and the idea can be broken down into your hook and then into the actual foundation for the post. So the hook can be 7 mind-blowing do's and don'ts for Instagram, and then the foundation can be the do's and don'ts, the comparison between what you shouldn't do and what you should do. So you have the idea stage, then you have the copy stage, and that can be everything from writing the captions to actually writing the hooks, writing the value slides, writing the call to actions. That's the copywriting. Then you have copy editing. So I always try to leave a 24-hour gap between me writing my content and me editing that content. It's a night and day difference. And then you have the actual execution. This is where things usually change depending the format. So if you're talking about a carousel, you can take that copy and you can start designing around it. If we're talking about video, you can take that script, you have to record it and then edit it. That's the execution portion. And then you have scheduling and managing. So scheduling your post is quite easy. You just take all the different elements you have built and you just prepare it through either a scheduling tool or manually. That's quite self-explanatory, but you have to make sure that that flows within your award, your goals, your award, your funnel. So most of us don't create content for the sake of it. Most of us create content for some sort of an outcome. So you have to make sure that within the scheduling piece, you take that into consideration. So for me, from these 5 elements, you have to be really mindful and you have to respect that you're not going to thrive in all 5 areas. It's extremely difficult. And even that throughout the years I have created more than 20,000 posts, I still have my favorites, and I still, for the love of God, wouldn't spend my afternoons editing videos. I hate that shit. That's why I outsource it.
Mm.
So from realizing these 5 elements and realizing that all posts are a combination of these 5 elements, you have to pick and choose where you're going to be focusing. Some people are phenomenal copywriters, others suck at that. So you have to realize what your bottlenecks are. You have to delegate and be smart about it. There's a really good methodology to do that, which is called the Eisenhower matrix, which is essentially enables you to find which are the areas that you should be delegating, which are the areas that you should just remove straight up, which are the areas you should be prioritizing. So utilizing that, utilizing being the mindfulness, you should pick and choose, I would say, three to four out of these 5 areas and double down on them, and then delegate everything else.
The Eisenhower matrix that you're talking about, is that something like, is like a test you can take or something like that, or?
No, it's literally a template that people can find online. So if you Google it, you'll be able to find it. It's a table with X and Y axis, and then each quadrant has a specific purpose. One of them is going to be delegation quadrant, another is going to be removal quadrant, another is going to be tasks that are not a priority. So you can take your time with them, and then another one is do this ASAP.
Got it. So when you look at people's, because I'm sure you look at a lot of people's content, right? And I'm sure people ask you many questions. I always see people and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are you doing that? Like, why, like I see so many like mistakes that people make. In your opinion, what are some of the most common mistakes that people make that stops them from growing?
I think a lot of people create content for themselves and not for the audience. I think that either for you or trying to scratch your ego and you're trying to showcase your knowledge to the world, and thus you're utilizing really complicated words that make you sound smart in your mind, but in actuality nobody understands what you're talking about. And that was me when I started out. I was writing out these long ass carousels. They were essentially ebooks in the formats of carousels, and I realized nobody is going to read this shit. Actually, if I saw that guy made a post, I'm going to say, fuck no, I'm off this platform. I'm not spending 5 minutes just to consume this. So a lot of people, again, are creating content for themselves, which is fine. If you want to create content for yourself, just to express yourself, that's absolutely fine. Just don't have expectations that the platform is going to reward you. Because at the end of the day, these social media platforms, they're not social media platforms, they're businesses. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are creating content for themselves. A lot of people don't understand the platform that they're on. They haven't done any research. They open the platform, they vomit what they want to say on the platform, and then they close it and they don't spend any meaningful time actually researching. I think that 90% of the issues that people have can actually be circumvented if they spend 15 minutes, I would say every 3 days or so, just encapsulating themselves within the platform, seeing what works, trying to ask themselves questions why this actually worked, applying critical thinking and trying to apply that to their content. And then the last thing is a lot of people are not giving the organic marketing enough time. Now, as cliche as it sounds, if you want fast results, go with performance marketing. If you want long-term results, usually you should be going with organic. But organic takes a little bit of time to start. The metaphor that I give here is with a fire. So imagine you're building out your fire. You first have to collect wood. You need to make sure it's dry. Then you need to make sure that you put it in the right order. You need to make sure that you have something to start the fire with. And then you will start seeing sparks slowly. And then you can start blowing. I'm not going to show myself blowing on camera, but you get the picture. So you can start blowing, and slowly those sparks are going to start turning into a bigger and bigger fire. At that stage, you can put gasoline on that fire and it can go exponential. Mm-hmm. But it takes time. And for me, organic marketing is that first foundational of these first foundational stages in which you find the wood, you place it in the right order, you get the sparks, you nourish those sparks. But that takes much more time than just pouring gasoline on top, which can be seen as the performance marketing.
That's true. That's true.
So a lot of people don't give organic enough time, and after 30 days, they say, oh, this Instagram thing isn't working for me. But they never knew what would have happened if they stuck around for day 31, and that next video may have gone.
That's true too. So
So yeah,
you coach people and like you work with clients, right? So
correct.
when
So
you look at,
my
yeah,
yeah, my
go
main
ahead.
business is my agency. I've been doing my
Got it.
agency and
Got
I've
it.
been practicing, and for me, that's something which I feel like most marketers should do. So most marketers should first be practitioners and then they should be educators. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't put your feet in the water, and if you don't really understand how the marketplace is moving, it changes so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot only be educating, you cannot only be thinking about, oh, how do I sell out my next course?
Yeah.
You actually need to spend time executing, and
Yeah.
not only on your profile, on the vast majority of profiles.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how I was, because I had my agency. I was like, oh, I'm a creative director. Like I know what, I know what works, and I didn't. I was like, I don't actually use my social media myself. But when I actually started using it, it was a total different story. Yeah.
It is. I was the exact same way.
I also I love what you said about when you write. I just want to quickly note when you write and then you wait 24 hours before you edit, because it's like that for me too. Like for some reason, after I sleep, I wake up and I'm like, "Oh, why did I say that?" Or like, why did I write it
It's
that way?
absolutely normal. It's absolutely normal. It's how our brains work. So sleep, for example, has a really obvious psychological effect. It flushes out toxins and it enables us to look at things the right way. But you've probably heard of the quote that people say, "Oh, I just looked at this with a fresh pair of eyes."
Mm-mm-mm.
That's You have to ask yourself, if something has been said for hundreds of years, it must have some truth within it. People may not have understood why, but
Yeah,
it must be true. So with that specific element, again, there are psychological processes that go through our brains, and when we take a step back, we enable ourselves and our senses to look at something with truly fresh pair of eyes and not emotional connections.
yeah,
So copywriting and copy editing, two separate things that need to have some time
yeah,
period between them.
yeah, yeah. Cliches are the cliche for a reason. um,
Absolutely.
so before, when you were saying those the mistakes that people make, so when you
Hmm.
look at clients or when you look at people that, let's say, you're coaching or you're trying to teach people, why do you, because a lot of those things are cliche, right? Be consistent, like
Yeah,
don't give up, like like don't make content for yourself, like, but for the audience, all of those things, like it's not like they don't know. So what do you
absolutely.
think it is, what is it that's stopping them from
Yeah,
doing it?
yeah,
Do you think?
absolutely. I like saying this. Growth on social media isn't rocket science. Growth on social media is simple, but just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. And
Mm,
it's not only on social; it's everywhere. When we look at the business, how is a successful business actually made? You need to be bringing in more money than you're bleeding out. That's it. If you get these two things right, which are quite simple, you're good. But if you go to Steve Jobs and Steve Jobs back in the day, and you said to him, "Oh, here's how we're going to be reviving Capo," he's going to spit in your face and not look at you anymore. So everything is simple, but that doesn't mean that the execution is easy. And I feel like that when it comes down to social media marketing, it's 80% psychology and 20% technology. And then when you
mm,
take a look at the psychological elements, it's understanding your audience psychology and then understanding your own mindset. Because so many talented creators, and I say this quite often as well, I'm not the best content creator. My graphics are not the best. My copywriting is not the best. English isn't even my first language. My video editing is shit. My performance on video is also shit. I much more prefer having conversations like this one or speaking on stage. But the reason that I have been able to reap success whilst others have not is the fact that I'm consistent as fuck. I have not missed a single day of posting in 1,594 days. No matter if I'm sick, no matter if my mother has brain tumor, which actually happened, and this is a real story. In the first year of my Instagram
uh,
presence, we found out that my mother had a brain tumor, and we had to fly out for her operation. And that was happening whilst I was posting, whilst I was engaging, whilst I was answering DMs. So there is no excuse.
yeah,
So
that's
again,
that.
for me, it really does come down to realizing that just because it's simple, it doesn't mean it's
Yeah,
easy. And most people just find a way to prove themselves that the reality that they believe in is the right one, and they shape
Yeah,
reality how they want to, and they find excuses, and they're not mindful enough to catch themselves.
yeah. The boring work is the thing that I feel like people have such hard time doing, and that the boring work is really what success is all about. you know.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. People are constantly searching for hacks, and I would lie if I said that throughout the years I haven't been feeding into that agenda, because I've created a lot of content pieces focusing on specific strategies and tactics, which, even though I do believe benefit people, they're not really what will get them success.
Yeah.
But people don't really want to hear for the 1000 time consistency is what matters. I think that the only way for you to be able to get that message across is through storytelling, the way that you do it. Because it's one thing to say to people, oh, you need both a creative person and an organized person in your company. It's another thing to tell them that story from the
That's
I one
true.
that you actually.
That's
So,
true. You know what I
yeah,
found? That does convert certain percentage of people more than just saying it. But I still think that 80% of people, even if they got it and they understood it, doesn't mean they're gonna take action. Like,
and
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
that's true. That's true. That's also two separate things: understanding something and applying something.
Yeah.
And in most cases, again, I feel like that the most underestimated tool for content creators is mindfulness. Because if you understand something, but if you don't apply something, that means that there is friction. Either there's lack of intimate clarity, so you don't exactly know how to take that from knowledge to action, and someone needs to lay out these first building blocks, or there is some sort of limiting belief,
Mm-hmm.
at least from my experience. So if you're mindful enough, you can start asking questions. Why is this happening? What is stopping me from executing on this? And starting to reflect. It's not going to peel itself and show itself immediately. It's like an onion. You have to do it layer by layer. But once you actually get it, it feels so good. And
Yeah.
for me, for the longest time, I was going through that process with my own social media presence. And that's a testament to the fact that you don't have to have it figured out when you begin. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I actually say don't have it figured out, because the best teacher is going to be experience. And the only difference between masters and beginners is the fact that the masters have actually failed more times than the beginners have tried. So have a direction in mind, start something, start peeling back that onion, start getting more clarity and more clarity, start asking yourself more questions and being mindful throughout the whole process. And then you will reach that conclusion. And for me, the game changer was year 2 out of my journey, because at that moment I said, okay, this is what I want to be doing. And it
Mm-hmm.
was right around the time that I had at the time my biggest case study, in which we were able to grow a pro from 0 to 500,000 in 6 months. And when I was speaking with that client, I genuinely saw how his life changed and how the lives of the people who he worked with changed. And it clicked.
Wait,
I
what's the
realized that,
difference?
yeah,
Okay, I think you were about to say it. So
yeah. I realized that it's a domino effect, and with my own work, I can only reach an X amount of people. But when I start working with other people and applying my knowledge to their journeys, they can then start applying that to
Mm,
someone else, and it's a domino effect. And that
got it.
is what brings me perfect purpose to this day,
So
because
it's
you
like,
never know who's watching. Yeah,
because like 2 years into it, you've already had like hundreds of thousands of, like you've already grown your account a lot, and you had the huge
absolutely,
audience. But then you still felt like it wasn't going the right direction. Yeah.
absolutely. It's a never-ending journey, because being a person is a never-ending evolution. We are literally programmed to never be at a place of stagnation. If we have a huge emotional spike, our emotions and hormones are programmed in a way in which they're going to balance
Mm,
themselves out. And the reason for that is because emotions spike in both directions. So if we have something really nice happen to us, so let's say our first 100,000 followers, huge release of dopamine, we are super happy. But then you notice that after a few days, oh, it's not that
mm,
great anymore. But imagine what would happen if you had a dip in the opposite direction and you couldn't balance yourself out. So a loved one passed away, huge emotional dip, huge pain, turmoil. you're literally feeling like you're breaking apart. And if you cannot bounce back, it's game over. So evolution has literally programmed us to always be looking for the middle ground.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, it really does come down to evolution and the fact that personal branding is about being a person, and being a person is about change. So
Yeah.
we are always evolving. And if you feel like there's friction in your social media presence, if things don't happen effortlessly, most likely there's an area of discomfort that you have to start unraveling and peeling away.
Yeah, like it really, I think it really does, like you said, like only 20% of it is technology and the other 80% is things like this.
Yeah, it's
um
mindset. Is the boring work, as you said.
yeah, let's talk about the 20% a little bit, because I know that's kind
Mhm.
of your area of expertise. um what are some tactics that are working for you right now? Like, are there anything that's working right now that maybe didn't work a year
Mhm.
ago? Or yeah.
Yeah. Stories, my Instagram stories are pulling in more traffic at the moment than my feed content, which is mind-boggling. I've never been big on stories. I've always, because I'm really introverted as a person. If someone sees me, let's say on a conference, I'm the exact opposite. I recently found out that there are people who are ambiverts. So when a situation arises, they can be both extroverted and introverted. So as a person, I'm quite private. I don't like sharing. I don't even share to my mother. So I don't really like utilizing stories. I didn't really like utilizing stories. But with GM automation, which everyone is talking about, already. With GM automations, stories have become a massive source of traffic for me. And again, as I mentioned, my stories are bringing in more traffic at the moment than my feed content, which is phenomenal, because that has enabled me to fuel my newsletter. And I've grown my newsletter from 0 to 25,000 within this year. So
Wow.
for me, that's a massive, massive success. Another thing which is working and which you're exploring as well is threads. Threads is criminally underrated. I've been preaching it to my creator friends all day and all night, and people have started repurposing their content. And I feel like it really does come down to demand and supply. Every social media is a balance between demand and supply. And the moment you realize it, your consistency is going to become 1,000 times easier, because it really does come down to demand for content. So, how much minutes do people spend consuming content, and supply of content? How much minutes of content is being produced? And if the supply of content is super high, but the demand isn't, your content is going to just tank on average. You're not going to get enough reach just because there's not enough eyeballs to go around. People cannot look at all of the posts that are being produced. And then the opposite things happen when demand is sky high, but supply is low. There's a lot of eyeballs, but there's not enough good content to go around. And that's when you can see that attention arbitrage happening. That's when you can see platforms such as Threads thriving, because there's a lot of people on that platform, 175 million monthly users, which is a good chunk of people, and there's not enough creators.
Yeah, that's true. I see, sometimes I go on Threads, I see somebody who has like 100,000 followers in Threads, and I go to their Instagram and they have like 200 followers. Like, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
that it's quite common too.
Threads is massive. Honestly, I underestimated Threads. I wanted to test it out because, again, I'm a data nerd, and I always give platforms a chance. And I had said that I'll be giving 6 months of testing to Threads because I see big upside and I'm quite bullish, but I'm not quite sold on the concept. But I was like, oh, this platform doesn't even have insights. How good can it be for actual business purposes outside of brand awareness? But I was quite shocked, actually. I have been able to close multiple five-figure deals through Threads. I have been able to grow thousands of subscribers through Threads for my newsletter. So even though Threads doesn't have all of the tools that are necessary for creators, such as simple insights, it's still such a massive opportunity. And the fact that Threads is the first platform that's actually connected to Instagram, and is essentially by growing your Threads profile, you can, if you're smart about it, grow your Instagram profile,
Yeah.
is such a big bonus. And then everything with the Fediverse, that's just the cherry on top.
Yeah. Yeah, like I originally started using Threads just because I wanted to like practice writing and just
I
get that
think Threads
instant
is the
feedback.
perfect
Yeah.
platform for you. I think Threads is the perfect platform, and I would actually love seeing more wonk form stories from you on Threads.
Those
I
do
think that
really well, actually.
they do. They do really well if you can keep the audience.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that you have that, you have what it takes to keep the audience. So even if you just transcribe content from carousels to long form text, I still think that they're going to do well. And there's no
Mhm.
reason not to do both, actually.
Yeah.
Post it as
Yeah,
a
no,
carousel,
that's
then
kind of what
transcribe it.
I'm doing right now. So IG stories, you said, is there any kind of specific tips you would give on how to use
Yeah,
IG
just use
stories?
automation. Yeah, just use automation. It's unfair. Honestly, people who use automation, people who don't use automation, they're playing two different games. It's not
Can you
even
elaborate on that?
comparable.
Because there's
Yeah,
so many haters of automation, right? Like I see on Threads people talking shit about automation, and then there's the other camp where they're all praising. So what's going
yeah.
on there?
From an
What are they
user
missing?
experience, yeah, from an user experience point of view, I do think that it can be frustrating if the automation isn't set up correctly. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, it's not as easy to set up automation as it should be, even though MainChat and platforms such as MainChat have done a phenomenal job. I think that the most amount of hate for automation comes from bad user experience. But
Yeah.
if you think about the foundations, there is no reason that automation isn't the biggest creator of value for the audience as well. Because you don't have to go to that profile, stop your scrolling, open a link that you don't know where it's bringing you to. You get everything directly to your inbox. So it actually enables you
Yeah.
to continue your consumption of content,
Yeah.
which most people like.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I think that if automation is done correctly, and if of course automation isn't done every single day on every single story multiple times per day, I think that there is no reason for hate. Most hate comes from bad automation, as in most things in most
Yeah.
platforms.
I agree with you because like the other day I saw somebody said, "Oh, like this video got 1 million views or something like that," and I went to go see it on YouTube, but they didn't put the link. They didn't like I go to their profile. There's no link for it. Like it was like so frustrating, right?
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass, and it's the biggest thing is that the platform doesn't like it as well. Because as we
Mm-hmm.
discussed earlier and we touched upon it, these are not social media platforms that we are on. We are on a business
Mm-hmm.
land. At the end of the day, these platforms all have shareholders and they all have profits to hit. And when you bring people outside of the platform, of course, they're not going to
Mm-hmm.
like it. But if you actually bring people to the DMs, that's a completely new, different story because the sole purpose of Instagram right now is to
That's true.
facilitate conversations.
That's
So
true.
you're not only not bringing people outside of the platform, which is a big no-no, you're actually keeping them in the platform and you're building a conversation in GMs, which they love.
Yeah.
Now, is this going to last forever? Hell no. I think that ManyChat is too ambitious for their own good, and I do think that Meta is not going to give such a big part of the pie to ManyChat. And we can already see what's happening with AI agents, which have rolled out to 50 creator accounts, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things, but it's in really early beta testing, which essentially is going to do the same thing that MainChat does just with AI and much better integration within the Meta ecosystem. But for the time being, using automation and not using automation is a night and day difference. And I have a few newsletters in which I have broken down my whole complete strategy, and they have even given out my templates. So I think that that's a good starting point for people. And again, there's so much information on automation by MainChat. They have a free course. So if people want to learn that, they can. They just need to let go of limiting beliefs and give it a try because I feel like it's easy to hate on something if you haven't tried it and given it a
So
proper
if
chance.
somebody wants to just start using automation from the beginning, what would you recommend them to do? Like like
Mm-hmm.
what's like the
Yep.
simplest automation you would ask them to set up?
Yeah. So I would look at it as a flow chart. The first question within that flow chart is, do you have a freebie or do you have something you can give out for free? If you have something that you can give out for free, the easiest thing that you can do is say something along the lines of, a lot of people ask me for this specific thing. I actually have this specific solution. GM me a specific number, let's say 5, or a number that has significance for you, and I'll send you this free resource. That's it. the simplest automation. If you don't have a freebie or something that you can give out for free, generally the automation that I love running is an automation which is with some sort of either a questionnaire. So you can ask people some questions within DMs, they can answer them, and then you can actually switch to a live chat. And you can
Mhm.
say, hey, I actually saw the answers of the questions. I love that. Do you want to hop on a call? Let's say if you have some sort of a
Mhm.
core offer that you can close them, or just have a nice conversation and deepen the relationships with your audience.
Yeah,
Which
that would
again,
be
for me, yep,
that would be gold for coaches because
I
I
do
feel like
that
your goal
with
as
my
a coach,
launches.
yeah.
Yeah, I do that with my launches. The last time that I did it without automation, I got around 500 replies, and it took me a week to just go through them.
Mm,
When I did it with automation, first I got 3 times the reply, so I got 1,500 replies, and all of that was taken care of within one day.
right.
So it can be used. Again, that's a little bit more challenging for most people.
Mhm.
I do recommend just building out a freebie because usually that's the way to go, and
Mhm.
have giving people an incentive will increase your replies, and that's usually what's going to pump up your story views.
Yeah, yeah. Like when I realized I tried that, right. And yeah, like my story view got like 10. I usually get like 2,000, 3,000, and
Yeah,
that day I got like 10,000. And
it's easy. It's an easy, and there is no reason to use links anymore.
yeah,
There's
I
absolutely
agree.
no reason. Every time that I
Do you
see
think
a
links?
big creator, yeah,
Do you think links actually like hurts the algorithm? Because I
oh,
noticed when I put
absolutely.
links.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's no question. It's no question. Again, it's a business. And these patrons, they need to keep people on the patron in order to make money. If you bring people out of the platform, you can bet that they're not going to be shouting on top of their lungs, hey, look at this guy. He's losing us money. Go check him out. He's so
Yeah.
awesome. No. So links absolutely do crush views. And if you look into the click-through ratio, uh, I would have presumed that using automation would reduce it. So less people will click because it's more steps. They first have to reply something, then they have to check the DMs. But because the volume is so larger, you're actually pushing in more clicks as well.
Mm,
So for me, every single time I see a big creator using a LinkedIn story, I just go in his DMs and bully him into utilizing automation because it's a no-brainer for anything, for anything. Landing pages, YouTube videos, podcasts, there are absolutely no reason to use
yeah.
links. I've tested this extensively.
I also love what you said about like, will this last forever? No, and that's what I love about you is that you have no emotional attachment to these things, right? Like, I feel like so many people are like, okay, this is the hill I'm
Yeah.
gonna die on. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I think that social media, so a lot of people say social media is all about consistency. That's false. Social media is all about adaptation. So when it comes down to success on social media, you can be consistently bad and you can be consistently producing shit content without adapting, and you will never succeed. So you may be on day 1000 of you producing shitty videos, no chance you're going to catch a break. So you need to not only consistently be putting out content, but consistently be consuming content. So you are improving not only your artistic skill, but your artistic eye, which is a whole different concept that we can dive and discuss. But you need to consistently be consuming content so you can improve your eye, consistently studying your own content, gathering data, analyzing, and consistently applying that information. So it's,
Mhm.
if you had to describe it, it's all about adaptation. So on social, all of the platforms are changing, all of the platforms are competing with each other. TikTok released an Instagram clone the other week. Nobody knows about it because they did piss poor marketing for it. But
Mm.
in general, again, all of the platforms are in competition, all of the platforms are evolving, and it's normal for us, the creators of these platforms, to have to evolve with them. And if you're not evolving, you're going to be left behind. That's
What
the
is that
truth.
platform called from TikTok?
Uh,
I never even heard about it.
yeah, yeah. I feel. I think it's called we with WHEE. I'm not entirely sure because again, Their branding isn't really that good. But again, if you Google TikTok's new platform competing with Instagram, you'll find it had
um
10,000 downloads within the first week in comparison to Threads 100 million, which
got
again,
it.
it had integrations, but still massive.
When it comes to content, like, and messaging, what I notice is that whether I'm on Thread or Instagram, I know that I can kind of guess what people will like. For example, if I make content that makes them feel like positive, like, oh yeah, don't worry, you got this, like that type of content people love. But then whenever I'm like, hey, you're doing this wrong, and like I'm kind of like telling them like you're lazy, like I'm
Yeah,
kind of being a little bit more hard
harsh.
on them, like it doesn't
Yeah,
do well.
yeah.
Did you notice like how you word things, or like how the tone of the messaging, like what works and what doesn't work, like?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's something which plays a big role for this outside of the how people are emotionally wired, is the fact that nowadays the barrier to entry to content creation is so much lower. If you think about it, when we began on Instagram, AI didn't exist, or if it
Mhm.
existed, which it did technically, but it wasn't widespread, we didn't have access to it. Nowadays, anyone can create AI content from scratch. You can literally ask ChatGPT to create 30 posts for you, export that to a Google Sheet, import that into Canva, and Canva will automatically create carousels based on that data. So everyone can
Holy
create
shit.
content even easier than it used to be. And if you want to turn it into reels, guess what? You can generate AI voices for yourself. You can ask in video is one of the platforms that does this. Captions app also does it, but you can ask it to create video content with B-roll, and you also have a reel with this. But anyone can create content much easier, which means again going back to that supply and demand, the supply of content is much higher, and thus the amount of bullshit content is much higher as well.
Mm.
So you cannot count on using the same old hooks, which most people they use negativity because they know the negativity sells and they're super harsh. But I feel like no one comes to social media just to be scolded and to be said to say, "Oh, you suck." Everyone wants some sort of positive reimbursement, and they want to feel hope more than anything, in my opinion. They
Yeah.
want to know that
The neg
it's possible.
the negativity gets a lot of views and it gets comments, but I feel like those never translates to followers. Do you
Yeah,
understand what I mean?
yeah. If you and again, it also comes back to what we discussed earlier, which was, is it really worth it to build a brand that's not really authentic and you're just doing
Yeah,
it for the clout?
that's
Because
true.
you will see a lot of Instagram profiles that are clearly, their whole focus is how do I get as most amount of followers as fast as possible, and they're setting themselves up.
I agree. I think what I see is like I see these big accounts who doesn't actually have a solid business, because obviously they either copy content or whatever it is. So it doesn't actually help them make money. So like what was the
You'll
point
be
of that?
surprised. Yeah, I've had the blessings to communicate with a lot of creators, and I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons for my success. The fact that I'm surrounding myself with the community, people such as yourself. I still remember our first discussion when you were super small profile. I had a headway a few months, so I had already grown. But conversations like that or what fuel me, and I feel like it's again part of who we are as people living in tribes, living in communities. That's why memberships thrive. That's why your membership, which is done the correct way, thrive. And that's something which I'm building on the back end as well. You need to surround yourself with good creators. And I was getting to the point which I wanted to make, which I've spoken with a lot of creators, and there are creators with 10,000 followers, absolutely crushing it, making more money than that I am making. And there are creators with 5 million followers making far less. So it's not all about attention. Attention
Mm,
is just the top of the funnel. You need to be mindful about the middle and the bottom. You need to be mindful about
mm,
how you're nurturing people, building out fans, connections which are going to be there for you when things go south,
mm,
and then actual clients.
yeah. Yeah, like that I agree with, and also the first point, like the so many people don't underestimate the value of that, like collaborating and connecting with other creators. And remember, we had that like little DM chat group, and like you learn
It's massive.
so much from those things, like from
It's
the
massive.
real insiders. Yeah, yeah.
I feel like it really does come down to, again, another really big point, which is education in social media. So a lot of people are just giving more information, but more information is not the solution. Information in my, I look at it as an iceberg. Information is the tip. Then you have the bottom of the iceberg, which is the bigger portion, and that's feedback, reiteration, taking the information and applying it, receiving feedback, being in a community that will authentically say that you're shit, and you won't take it personally. You will take it as constructive feedback that can be applied to make you better. Mr. Beast to this day has these huge communities of creators that he's speaking with on daily basis, even though by all means he has made it. So for me, community is absolutely a necessity.
Yeah. I have one last question for you. I didn't know we talked for like an hour already. uh, what softwares do you use? And if for somebody who's getting started and they don't know how to like use design softwares or something like that, what are some main softwares that you would recommend people start with?
Yeah, yeah. As we said, AI has truly made everything much easier nowadays. I usually would say that if you have graphic design experience and if you are feeling like you're not afraid of a huge ass learning curve, Adobe is definitely the way to go. So I do use Photoshop for all of my content pieces. So Adobe is probably the golden standard. But if you're not a designer and if you're not selling designs and you just need a vehicle that will get your information across, I absolutely recommend looking into softwares like which are browser based like Canva. There are a lot of templates for Canva. So that's a really big selling proposition. Or something like Adobe Express, which again is a browser based. It has a lot of premium assets from Adobe, which is phenomenal, and it's super easy to use. It's also, if you compare it side by side, it's also cheaper than Canva Pro. So I do make the biggest recommendations for people to, again, if they don't have a design background, don't bother with Photoshop. You don't need it, especially if you're not selling designs. Go with something like Canva, that's plenty, or something like Adobe Express. Again, that's plenty.
What I actually thought of another question.
Oh, absolutely. Go
So
ahead.
while you were
Go
saying
ahead.
that, by the way, like, what do you use for like videos, and what should people use for like videos?
For videos, it doesn't really matter as much because pretty much all softwares have the same solutions. Um, honestly, Premiere Pro is again the golden standard, but it's not the only solution. I like creating videos more on the spot. So I like creating videos less professionally, more authentically. And for that, I utilize just my phone and CapCut. That's plenty.
Got
I
it.
know
Got it.
some people that are entirely editing videos in TikTok at the TikTok editor and Instagram's editor, which has gotten a lot better. So there's one point which I want to make. Never make an excuse out of your software. It's just
Mhm.
the tool. So it doesn't really matter which tool I use. It doesn't really matter which tool you use. I've seen people crush it with CapCut. I've seen people crush it with Premiere Pro. I've seen people suck with Photoshop. I've seen people suck with Canva. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just
I
how you
see.
use it.
I see people use like the notes app on iPhone. They just write
They
it. They
just,
took a
yeah, take
screenshot,
screenshot. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it goes
absolutely.
viral.
Absolutely. That's social media for you. That's social media. Social media by design, the way that it was created is for people to connect.
Yeah,
And most people don't have huge ass production staff behind them, making sure
yeah,
they look perfect. In fact,
yeah.
that can actually ruin your chances of organic success because if your content is always too polished, it may seem unorganic. It may seem as performance marketing, and people will scroll. The same way that when the ads happen on TV or radio, you immediately block them out.
Mhm. Okay, last, really, really last question. How much time do you spend on content creation and engagement? How much time did you use to spend? And what would you recommend people to spend, like minimum, like let's say per week or something? Yeah.
I've been entirely transparent. Used to spend 16 hours per day on my social, and that was at the time in which I had an agency. So I was in the beginning. Whoops, in the beginning I would absolutely say that I was spending a solid
That's
100
when you got like
hours.
50,000 followers in 3
Yeah,
months.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That makes sense.
I would absolutely say that at that moment I was spending 100 hours per week on work-related activities. It wasn't sustainable. I burnt out massively. I literally fell apart. My Again, a lot of bad stuff happened. I'm still recovering physically and
Mm,
mentally. So it's not sustainable. And recent years, I've only been working with busy experts and professionals, and there's no way they're going to be spending 4 hours engaging on Instagram. That's bullshit. So what I would say as a minimum would be 5 hours. You need to spend 5 hours in some sort of activity related to studying the patterns and creating content. And again, if you listen to what I said earlier about breaking your content into stages and finding where you thrive within these stages and then outsourcing everything else, you're good to go. Because if you're time poor, you should at least be financially stable. And if you're financially
mm,
stable, you should at least be able to delegate tasks.
outsource, yeah.
If you're both time poor and resource poor, you're doing something wrong.
Which is so many people actually. Like so many people say that,
Yep.
right?
In that case, it's all about prioritization. You're not really time poor. It, and again, this will ruffle some feathers. I'm not a parent, so I don't want to take anything away from it. But there are plenty of examples of parents that are multitasking and they're raising their children phenomenally and their families phenomenally, and then they're building a business and side hustles, and then they have a 9 to 5. So I don't want people to be making excuses. I
Yeah,
absolutely understand that I'm in a blessed position in which I have more time than usual, and I'm obsessed and I do this, and sometimes I game with my wife, and then that's it.
yeah,
But yeah, I would say that I used to spend 16 hours. Nowadays, I spend less than an hour per day on this. And then I spent a lot of time just thinking because I do believe that
mm,
what separates experts from everyone else is how much thought, energy they can dedicate to their craft. So I'm
yeah,
constantly thinking when I'm watching a movie, I'm trying to think back on how can this be implemented in my own content. Something that I do quite often on my socials, you may have seen it, is what if X character had an Instagram profile. So for example, when I watch a really good movie, I did one for
mm.
June. I just make what
I
if
saw the one you did
June.
with
Yep.
Jesus.
Yep. No, I
Or
didn't. I
God,
don't have
Zeus.
one. Yeah.
Zeus,
As
yeah.
Zeus. Jesus. Yeah. 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 So
But you
I
should
am
do one with
constantly
Jesus.
thinking. Oh, that I thought about it. It's such a touchy subject that again
That's true.
I'm going to stay away from it. Even though I do think that a little controversy is good now, every once in a while, and especially on social media, there's no way that you will get your whole point across within, let's say, 10 seconds or a
Mm,
carousel. No way.
mm.
So a little controversy is what is required, but you have to be respectful, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
I
shouldn't
would say
forget where you
that
came from.
it's not even really controversy. It's really it's having an opinion, I think, and so you need an opinion. You can't just be
Yeah,
wishy washy. Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. What?
and I think
So
that
if
yeah, go ahead.
finish your thoughts. Yeah.
I think that most people don't have an opinion because they don't really know themselves. They lack mindfulness. They don't really know who they are, and thus they don't really know what their opinions are.
Agreed.
That's what I have reached as a conclusion. Because I work only with personal brand owners. And when I say what makes you you, they cannot answer that question.
Yeah.
They struggle.
Even
And
big
that's
ones.
normal.
Even big personal brands.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um. So let's say somebody is spending the minimum of 5 hours. Would you
Hmm.
recommend that person spend all of that in the content creation and planning that part, or any of it in engagement?
Yeah. Content creation is 80% of the outcome. Having said that, when you're starting out and you have no idea what type of content is quality content, that's a whole another topic, quality versus quantity content. I definitely recommend spending some time fostering your artistic eye, which comes down to studying, learning the language of the platform. And whilst you're looking at content and obsessing over it, you might as well leave comments and engage.
Mm.
So for me,
So you wouldn't
again,
put that much stress on the engagement part as part of
no,
growth.
engagement is definitely not necessary. Nailing content is necessary. Nailing engagement isn't. But nailing
Okay.
engagement is the only consistent traffic source on Instagram. It
Mm.
doesn't, you cannot control hashtags, you cannot control how you appear in the suggested for you list, you cannot control search engine optimization on Instagram, you can control engagement. It's guaranteed that if you engage more on with higher quality, you're going to get a good return on your investment. It's not
Yeah.
guaranteed that if you make a post, they're going to be shown to non-followers.
Yeah.
So engagement for that specific reason is valuable. And the other reason for engagement being valuable, which most people don't know, talk about, is because if you're doing it right, you should be reverse engineering the success of the post that you're engaging on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I've gotten to a place in which I know the average engagement of all of my competitors and their profiles. So I know that when I see that post, if it has above the average engagement, oh, this is a good one. Let me start reverse engineering quite succeed.
Yeah. Got it.
So I'm combining the engagement with the studying.
I also think that like I use engagement mainly just as like a networking tool to like meet people and
It's massive.
collect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's massive.
But
It's
remember in the
massive.
beginning
Sliding
days,
into the
remember
DMs.
everyone is talking about engagement. Like remember how much we used to spend insane amount of hours engaging, and I just don't think that's the
It's
case anymore.
predictable.
Yeah.
No, it still can
Oh,
be
you
used
think
for
so?
the same
Okay.
purposes. Yes, it still can absolutely be used for the same purposes, for sure. It's just so time consuming. It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
scalable. It's not scalable.
So only
And
do it
even
if you
if you
have
could,
time. Yeah.
yeah, even if you could hire out and delegate this, is it really worth it? Especially with the action blocks that are happening. So Instagram has massive, not only Instagram, Meta has massive issues with moderation on threads as well. Massive, massive issues. And everyone is getting action block left and right. Engagement is having difficulties because of this, but technically, from a theoretical standpoint, it can absolutely be used for the same purposes as we used to use it back in the day, but it's not scalable. It's not.
Yeah.
It's something to get your foot off the ground, and again, to use it as a tool for studying and fostering your artistic eye, which, by the way, another really great concept that people can remember is artistic eye versus artistic skill. If you don't know what that means, Google it. It's such a
Can you
mind-bending
give us
concept.
a quick summary?
Yeah, it's the reason why sometimes your posts don't feel right, essentially, because you have the ability to evaluate if what you're looking at is good, and then it's a separate ability to reproduce it. So you may be
Yeah.
looking at the painting and you may say, oh, that painting looks nice. But if you have to draw it, hell no.
Yeah.
And I actually got humbled
Yeah.
on this the other day when we went with my wife on painting classes. So I was looking at the painter and he was showing these things, and I said, "Oh, this is super easy. No issues. I've
Yeah.
seen better things than this."
Yeah.
And then I started drawing, and it looked like a 4-year-old drew it. So
Yeah, that's why
I,
like there's so many critics out there, right? Like, yeah, go try to do it yourself. Like,
absolutely, absolutely. So again, artistic eye, artistic skill, you need to foster both skills: the ability to evaluate why something has worked and why something is good, and then the ability to reproduce it. And both of them come down to, again, the foundation, which is practice. And you cannot rush this.
yeah. All right, thank you. I think you just dropped like a million knowledge bombs today. Thank you, so much, Reverend. Is there
It's
anything?
because, yeah, it's because of the phenomenal questions. I feel like, again, I do a lot of these interviews. Really rarely can we dive this deep because, yes, hacks, tips, tactics, they get the views. But at the end of the day, as we've discussed, they're 20% of the outcome. And again, your questions, your follow-up questions, were beautiful. So thank you so much for this work as well.
Thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for your time. What's if people want to either work with you as a client or learn from you, where do you want to send them to?
If I have to be entirely honest, at the moment, I'm not taking any new clients. I'm completely booked out until September. And then in September, I'm actually going to be getting officially married after having
Ah,
been engaged for 3 years. So
congratulations.
afterwards, I'm not entirely sure how things are going to be work-wise, but I am releasing a new product, hopefully at the end of the month, which is going to be combining everything that I have learned about content creation throughout my 20,000 posts that I have produced. And it's not only going to be courses, a course, because courses are bullshit. Is going to be, again, what we've discussed about that iceberg, top of the funnel information, but also the programs and the systems that are required for the execution. So we have a community, we have tons of practical elements and deliverables, and then because I'm a, an ex-pro gamer, that's not something a lot of people know about, but I used to compete in gaming. I also integrated gamification quite heavily, so it's crazy what we have been able to build. So yes, take a look at my Instagram profile. I have a highlight which is called new, and within that highlight, I have details about the upcoming product. I have a wait list that people can join. But yeah,
Awesome.
it's going to be huge. That's something which I joke around that I have been pregnant for the last 9 months, because it literally took so much time to code it from zero to build out everything, and I'm super excited for people to see it.
Amazing. It sounds like you have a lot of like good problems on your hand with your
Absolutely,
with your business.
absolutely.
You're getting married, and so yeah, everybody check out Harry's Instagram. I'm going to put all the links there. Definitely subscribe to the newsletter and go check out the new communities starting. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for your time, Harry, and I'll see y'all
Thank you
next
so much
week.
as well.
Cheers.